What's up guys, it's me Jeremy. With all the reworks going on and being released that we have right now, you can usually get a good idea of which champions are currently on the production timeline, and although Riot have announced a ton of upcoming full-scale reworks like Evelynn and Swain alongside some mini updates for champions like Xin Zhao and Azir, there's also a ton of other champions that have gone unmentioned in official updates because progress on their reworks hasn't really started yet, but they've still been mentioned by a bunch of Rioters themselves. And today I wanted to talk about some of those champions that multiple or at least some Rioters have expressed a desire to rework. And we'll be linking all of the original Rioter comments and all that good stuff in the description, so you can definitely check it out if you feel like verifying our sources or if you just want to do some research for yourself. Now the first champion we wanted to talk about today is Mordekaiser. Now he went through a little bit of actually quite a big rework when Riot decided to turn him into this marksman alternative duo bot laner, which was a pretty interesting direction for him. Of course, there's probably not an old Mordekaiser main that played him before the rework that was excited about the new direction, and he doesn't really see all that much play anymore unless he's having a particularly strong patch or can maybe abuse his dragon controlling ultimate. A lot of people remember Mordekaiser as being one of the rare tanky mage type characters, and he specialized in getting up close and personal while also trying to balance his health and shield. Although the old Mordekaiser definitely had issues and was in need of a rework, most people seem to agree that his last rework kind of flopped in terms of what Riot was trying to do with it, and he definitely needs a fresh start. Riot Meddler commented that Mordekaiser is indeed a very high priority target for a full update, and he also confirmed that a new model would be in the works alongside that gameplay too. So far we can't really say what Riot plans to do with Mordekaiser, but it seems like the community wants him to be maybe a little bit more similar to his previous solo laner type style, with some modernizations thrown into it. Next up, we have Nunu, which is a champion that, according to Riot Meddler, is around the same priority level as Mordekaiser. Riot Reeve 3 mentioned that it's unlikely that Nunu's rework will show up particularly soon though, because Riot doesn't like releasing two champions in the same role back to back, and right now Evelynn as a jungler is currently being worked on already and is considered to be a higher priority, so it's unlikely that they'll go from reworking the jungler Evelynn to reworking the jungler Nunu. That being said, Nunu has been around for quite a long time with not so much in the way of gameplay updates, so I would expect his rework to be on quite a massive scale actually. Nunu was always the go-to counter jungler back in the days, and it's a role that he still handles quite well. The issue is more that more recent champions can equal his counter jungling ability while also offering more advantages to the team. It really just comes down to the fact that Nunu is one of those champions that has a kit that is just super outdated and doesn't really have much to offer when it comes to versatility. We expect a rework to push his counter jungling identity even further, although it might be up to Riot to decide whether they want to add a useful secondary function to Nunu or alternate playstyles, or if they want to just double down and really focus on that to make him a really effective counter jungler. There's no concrete information available because of course they haven't started actual development on the rework, but multiple Rioters actually have confirmed in the past that they want to improve the synergy between his abilities, make them more useful, so it's likely that they might go the route of giving him alternate playstyles. The release of Ivern could suggest that Nunu might also head in the more support jungler type style. He's always kind of been torn between the roles of the support and the roles of a jungler, so it could make sense to push that since it's a playstyle that's familiar to players and could be quite interesting to develop for sure. Another champion that Riot's shown a lot of interest in reworking is actually Ezreal, although he's a much lower priority than some of the other champions on today's list. He's quite an interesting case because his kit has a pretty big reliance on mechanical skill, and as a result he doesn't really seem as outdated as he actually tends to be. He's had quite a weird history too, from all sorts of phases from him dealing no damage to being just an absolute monster to breaking items that were never even meant for him when he was played AP in the mid lane or maybe with the first iteration of jungler items. Reeve 3 confirmed that Ezreal's eventual rework would likely be be a visual and gameplay, the full package as well, although he noted the scale of ability changes could be similar to Tristana's, which means that you could maybe expect Riot to breathe some new life into his kit, most likely by improving his a little bit weird and lackluster W, and then giving his visuals an overhaul to bring him up to modern champion standards. Next up, we have a champion that I actually mentioned at the start of this video that's going to receive a mini rework, which is Xin Zhao. Interestingly enough though, it seems like the mini rework that he's going to receive very soon is only really intended to be a band-aid fix, because Riot also, in addition, on top of that, have plans to give him a full-blown visual and gameplay update in the future. Riot Meddler did admit that this full update is very low priority, probably at least 1.5, potentially even 2 years away, and it's no doubt because he's going to be receiving that mini rework for the time being, but we can definitely expect to see a much larger Xin Zhao update in a future season after the mini rework. Now, this mini rework that he's getting makes sense because they can improve him and really give him a lot of what he needs while staying within the constraints of his current kit. So assuming that it doesn't take too much time out of their production schedule, they can put Xin Zhao in a much better place that should actually be, quite reasonable until they can figure out a more developed identity for him. But Xin Zhao's rework is so far away that there's really no telling what his rework could look like, but it does go to show that Riot does really care about keeping their game fresh and keeping the community happy. A lot of game developers might just leave a character alone if they had bigger plans for years down the line, but by developing this mini rework, Riot's going to make sure that he's not just a completely dead and forgotten champion until the update releases. Now, when it comes to higher priority reworks, one you might not have considered so far is actually going to be Malphite. Now, the thing with Malphite is that he was actually originally planned to be a part of the tank update, but Riot wasn't really able to figure out what they wanted to do with him, or a kit that was satisfying enough for him within the amount of time that they actually had to develop the update, and as a result, Malphite's rework was cancelled at the time, but they definitely still want to revisit him in the future. Now, there's two major failings that Riot has when it comes to Malphite. He doesn't really deliver on his archetype of being this living mountain or like this massive rock elemental type thing, and his gameplay is actually kind of boring outside of his ultimate. He's kind of just like a one-trick champion where he just uses his ultimate and that's just about it. Malphite as a champion definitely has a really awesome niche to serve. He's a really, really amazing and reliable initiator, and he's awesome against AD heavy compositions, but that makes him more of a champion you'd pick in a specific situation rather than a champion you'd pick because you actually like to play him, or maybe you resonate with his character. So this makes him a great option and a reasonably higher priority for a visual and gameplay update because Riot can tackle the dull gameplay, make him a little bit more exciting and interesting and fun, and also fix his lackluster visuals. Now, Riot Reeve 3 noted that Malphite is either borderline tier 1 just on the edge or perhaps a proper tier 1 priority update, so it probably won't be that long before we see the update for him, potentially even sometime next year. As far as the gameplay direction goes, I wouldn't expect him to change too much. He would for sure still keep his ultimate, but hopefully he'll start acting a little bit more like Terrain, since he is supposed to be this, super epic rock creature, and currently his impassable Terrain type style can kind of just be passed by everyone with a mobility spell. In the next one, we're talking about two champions together actually. It's going to be Annie and Karthus. Now, Riot Reeve 3 replied to a poster on the official League of Legends boards, agreeing that both Annie and Karthus would really benefit from full visual and gameplay updates. Between the two, Karthus might actually benefit a little bit more from the update because his kit's a lot more complex and weird, with a lot more potential for change. Annie, on the other hand, is a very beginner-friendly champion, so she has a really awesome role in the game in terms of the overall champion base. And Riot does like to have those kind of entry points for each roles, the easy champion for mid laners kind of, and that's something that Annie does bring to the mid lane. And on top of that, Annie has a really dedicated player base and a lot of defining characteristics, so it's more important that she just gets some updates to her visuals and stuff rather than her actual gameplay. Karthus could also definitely benefit from some visual improvements, but Riot will likely wait for a time when they can maybe implement them alongside some gameplay updates. Now the last champion I wanted to take a look at today is Shaco, and this is one that Riot's actually really nervous about. And it's actually a rework that Riot has tried to develop in the past and canceled because they weren't able to figure out what they wanted to do with him. Riot Meddler commented that there are actually currently no plans for Shaco's full visual and gameplay update, so I would expect it to take a very long time, with a lot of updates happening before it. The problem is that Shaco has a very specific identity and a very specific and niche playstyle. He's an assassin at his core, but he's also meant to be this very deceptive trickster. And designing kits that match that identity, that sort of theme, is actually something that is just incredibly difficult. On top of that, Shaco also has one of the most dedicated player bases for a champion, so any sort of mistakes on his kit is something that could really hurt a lot of the players. And Riot has a bunch of other higher priority champions they want to cover, so it gives them a lot of time to throw around ideas for the office and brainstorm changes for Shaco. Hopefully they can find something that would benefit him in the long term. They've definitely been trying for quite some time actually, and I would say he, along with maybe Udyr, is one of the longest running cancelled reworks from the past at least. And with that said, that's just about all the champions we wanted to talk about today. There's definitely quite some more, so if you guys enjoyed this video, I would love to make a second episode of this in the future, perhaps even a third one. If you enjoyed the video, definitely hit that like button. If you didn't, feel free to hit that dislike button too. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.